Love to first thank Scott and Henry for putting this the event together, but also this panel. Just to have this group of 4 people on stage and the opportunity to meet with them over the next few days is really incredible that they do this. Really excited to do this panel. We'll be talking about a lot of different aspects of the startup ecosystem on the cardiac front, and maybe we'll start with some brief intros, starting with David.
Sure. I'm David Hochman. I'm the chairman and CEO of Orchestra BioMed. Our whole business is around forming partnerships, long-term partnerships that can help accelerate innovations to patients by aligning us with strategics. We have a partnership with Medtronic, for example, and it's really about forming a way where strategics can get involved with products during development while we're doing the work and we're protecting their P&L. And we know that at the end of the day, if we deliver a approvable product with strong data, we have a partner that's much better positioned than we are to commercialize that technology, and allowing us in that partnership to really integrate our thinking, our strengths, and work collaboratively. And it's going pretty well in terms of what we're doing with Medtronic and Trumo and another partnership.
Hi, I'm Chris Iso. I'm the better looking and younger Chris from leading corporate development. So I'm actually new in this role. I took over for Chris Cleary just about 3 weeks ago, but I led cardiovascular business development and M&A for the last, I guess, 13 years with Medtronic now, so all on the cardiovascular side.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Suennen. I lead American Heart Association Ventures, which is a multi-platform venture capital firm that does invest in MedTech as well as digital, as well as in social drivers of health, and among other things we're working on the platform.
Hi, I'm Nate Harrington. I'm with Phillips Ventures, and I've been with Phillips for about 13 years, and prior to that was 9 years at Boston Scientific in both operating BD roles and over to the side of venture, and very much enjoy working with my portfolio companies, so hope some of the pearls come out of it from this group.
Hey, I'm Ken Nelson. Started first half of my MedTech career with Guidant on the cardiac rhythm management side, and then Boston Scientific post-acquisition. And then the back half of my career building the commercial teams for what have become 3 of the 4 biggest players in cardiac digital health and remote patient monitoring. The first was iRhythm. The second was BioTelemetry, which got acquired by Philips. And the last one was Barty Diagnostics, which was acquired by Hillrom/Baxter. More recently, I started a venture fund with Paul Graham, the MedTech Advantage Fund. MedTech Advantage Fund will be investing exclusively in MedTech innovator companies, alumni companies that go through the program. We'll talk about all of that as we go through the discussion today. And then I'm on the boards of a handful of cardiac startups, including Cardiacare, who's here if anyone's interested in that company. It came over from Israel. Happy Tech, who's also here from Amsterdam. Smart Cardi out of Switzerland. Heartbeam out of San Jose. And Carix out of Sweden. So yeah, excited to have this discussion, and maybe we'll start off with someone who's been a pioneer in collaborating with within this ecosystem, and would love for Lisa to maybe tell the story. I didn't know this until recently, but Lisa started Cardiation Capital, and Cardiation Capital is a combination of AHA, Philips, UPMC, and I think RCT Ventures now, but would love for you to maybe talk about how that happened. And she's now blazing the trail to where some of the other cardiac institutions will be following in her footsteps and starting to invest in companies. But would love to hear the story.
So the story is that I was on a board with Nancy Brown, who's the CEO of the American Heart Association, longtime CEO. If you know, my guess is most people don't realize the level of activity that goes on at the Heart Association. It has $1.2 billion a year of income. That's split between philanthropy grants and $400 million of revenue from commercial enterprises that they operate. So it's a pretty big organization, broader than cardiovascular, stroke, brain health, a lot of other things related. So Nancy and I met each other on board. I had just left my venture fund during that time that I was at Silos Group for many years, and said, why aren't you guys doing venture? You fund all this science and research, but you don't get the financial benefit of all the things that come from it later. And she said, that's a good point. Why don't we look at that? Why don't I hire you to be a consultant and help us think through that? And I used that. That was my first consulting project after my my gig at Silos, and I helped them start Cardiation. And we decided that the best way to do that was to be in partnership with others that had interest and shared interest in the space. So we approached Philips and UPMC first, and went in together on doing this. So we created a standalone entity called Cardiation Capital. It's actually managed by Aphelion Capital. I don't know if Jake's here from that organization or not, but he was earlier. That group is run by Ned Sheets. Some of you may know him, longtime venture guy. And each party chipped in money and jointly owns it. And it went, and started investing, and now it's in Fund 2. And UPMC is no longer in the mix on Fund 2, but RCT Ventures joined up. So I ended up back at Heart Association after speaking to Nancy sort of randomly last year, and she said, this Cardiation thing worked out really well. We started a social venture fund as well while you were elsewhere, and now we want to do more. And would you want to come back and see that through? So there I am.
Great. So
Now you know.
when you think about the continuum of a startup, and you think about incubators, so there's regional incubators, there's national incubators. As the companies get a little bit more developed, there are, again, regional, academic, national, and global accelerators. They vary very differently, and we can talk about them in a minute, and maybe I'll talk about the Texas environment just to give an example of that. But then as you continue to go along, a lot of these companies will do multiple accelerators. I did several and highly recommend a few of them, including MedTech Innovator, which is the biggest globally, but would love to know how where Orchestra BioMed kind of fits into that ecosystem and how the collaboration between you all and Medtronic came about. Maybe Chris can talk about it as well.
Sure. Well, actually, we grew out of our own accelerator. I ran an accelerator called ATI, and we had a venture fund associated with it. And the ideation was really physician-driven. Identify unmet needs and create or identify solutions. The challenge we found, and I think being at this meeting and having just led a session with a fascinating array of companies, is not necessarily a shortage of good ideas. It's the gap between those ideas when they begin to show real proof and promise and how they're actually going to be brought to market, and the kind of significant capital, the change in skill sets and expertise that needs to happen, because for medical device, medical technology therapies, generally we're asking these innovators to become commercializers. And so our business was born out of kind of frustration, maybe desperation of having, created some powerful, good ideas. The one we're partnering with Medtronic is, we call it Backbeat, and we've now referring to it as atrioventricular interval modulation therapy, or AVIM. It's a powerful treatment for reducing blood pressure, a huge problem targeting high-need patients. That's delivered through a pacemaker. So we had gotten it through the stages of showing great clinical data, but now we were confronted with, if we had to go down the normal path, do we need to build a new pacemaker business? We're going to try and compete with Medtronic or Boston Scientific. And we always felt that, well, why aren't they buying us based on our early clinical results? And eventually, through some discussions with Chris's, there's a couple Chris's in the rooms and Eric Shantz here, we realized the issue that was preventing Medtronic from acting was constraints that they and their peer group have on R&D spend. Hey, we want to do that, but we have to live within the 8% spend that we have on R&D, and it's a 7% average spend for the industry. And so we were inspired by what happens in biopharma, where there's prolific partnerships, and without partnerships, and the most famous is BioNTech and Pfizer now, but there are so many partnerships that help bring drugs to the market, and said, hey, how do we rethink our business so that we can be a long-term participant in the value creation and also execute and financially enable that program with all of the expertise that Medtronic could bring to the table. So we figured that out. It took us a while, but it's working really well. Now we are pooling our knowledge, our expertise. We're running a pivotal trial on Medtronic's commercial device with our technology. We're paying for it, but Medtronic is a stakeholder in that. And ultimately, Medtronic has the rights to commercialize, and we couldn't think of a better partner for a pacemaker-based therapy. So we're able to think big and work hand in hand without necessarily triggering R&D challenges, which maybe Chris can talk about how that works for you guys.
Well, yeah, and what it did is it solved our problem, right? Our problem was the constraint, right? And so collaborating and working together, we actually are connecting the dots across the ecosystem so that we can do what we do good at, what we do really well at, which is bringing a therapy to market and establishing it to standard of care and bring it to the mass patients that we possibly can. What we obviously would love to do is bring more technology into our P&L and into our organic or inorganic investment, but we have constraints that we have to live within. And so these types of partnerships and collaborations are what actually enable us to bring more technology to the market than what we would typically do. Another example, right, is back in us working with a incubator back in 2015, after we bought 12 for mitral replacement. We looked at the landscape across for mitral repair, didn't see any kind of technology that we felt really comfortable in actually going in and either investing or acquiring at that stage. So we said, well, we have IP. What can we do with it? We actually partnered with the foundry, formed a company, gave license to our IP, and that is the creation of Half Moon that we are a major investor in, and they've now treated close to 20 patients in their early feasibility. And so it's those types of creative thought processes and, quite frankly, the constraints that actually stem and develop innovation from a partnership collaboration standpoint.
Great, thanks for sharing that. So when you think about how things have evolved, especially over maybe the last 10 years, and you see a lot more support of the device companies, of incubators, accelerators, programs like this that have really gotten very strong. You see the attendance from investors. I mean, all four of you are here, which is great. And you're giving access to yourselves to all these startups, which is also a really nice thing that you're doing to kind of give back to the ecosystem. What do you see, or what are some of the other things that you support? So for the startups I talk to, and anyone who's in the room that I've talked to about this, I always recommend try to get into MedTech Innovator. It's from a networking standpoint, it's the biggest and I think the highest quality accelerator. And then when you're going to raise money, I said you've got to be a part of LSI, and they'll all tell you that I'm pretty consistent with that. There's a couple other things I recommend, but would love to hear other things that you would recommend the companies do, other incubators, accelerators, or other things that can help these companies set themselves up better for success. Maybe start with Nate.
Sure, and I'll focus probably a little bit more on the basic blocking and tackling. I think one thing that you can do is introduce yourself to strategics early. Even if you're perhaps not looking for money from a strategic at a given point, I think the important thing is to realize is that it's important to have a conversation. And if you think about the spectrum of business development, which may ultimately end in an exit, you want to think about the beginning or how to work backwards towards it. And I think you want to take advantages of engaging with strategics, perhaps looking for money, perhaps looking for more of a partnership. One thing that I think has been helpful for Philips, not so much in the part of the business where I work, but if you think about installed base imaging and things of that nature, there's a lot of data being generated. And I think one of the great things is seeing that startups who are able to think about how to use that data. Of course, the buzzword AI comes to mind, but I think that's a good example of where partnerships can make sense. And then I think being open to having a strategic as an investor and on your board, it's a great chance to get insight from the inside of how a strategic is thinking about it, what you need to do to set yourself up for success. If you have particular problems and you want a sounding board, whether it's in regulatory, clinical, R&D, I know most of my colleagues at places like Medtronic, definitely Boston, are very open to working with startups and trying to give them the best advice possible. Ultimately, we want to see all these types of companies flourish and succeed, and frankly, get to the point where any of us might find them attractive to bring on inside. And it's a way of helping us de-risk some things, because if you're on the inside and you have to deal with a quality system of a Philips or a Medtronic, it can be a little bit daunting. So it's nice to be able to work outside that system. Perhaps not the most exciting answer, but I think some of that helps.
Well, love to hear from the rest of the group what your insights are there, how you're collaborating with the different parts of the startup ecosystem, and maybe we can start with Lisa. And I don't know if you want to talk about the Heart and Brain Accelerator, or however you want to talk about it.
We do a couple different things, and it's still evolving. But we've made a partnership with MTI to focus on supporting young cardiology and related companies to come through. Our whole mission is to advance the field of treating patients. And so for us, anything that translates science and research into real medicine and real delivery of care is a good thing. So however we can foster that is a plus. So that's one of the things we do. And we also have an accelerator focused on health equity in our mix. We have a program that allows young companies to license and utilize our care guidelines and integrate those into their products that my colleague Patrick Waite runs. We have programs and projects that we like to collaborate. And we get approached to do all sorts of wild and crazy stuff. And so to the extent that companies are interested in working with us, we're always interested in hearing about it. But I would say that the thing I do most, myself, not necessarily as part of the Heart Association, is help young companies really understand. And this is, I think, a particularly big problem in MedTech. The folks who are innovators are often, they're not often very savvy about the healthcare system itself. They don't learn about how Medicaid works. They don't learn how Medicare works, how payers work, what they care about. They just live in sort of more of their technology world, and some of that technology is amazing, but never has the ability to really come to market because they don't fully understand the payment dynamics, the alignment of financial incentives, and all the things that go around that. Let's just forget about all the FDA and regulatory issues. That's a whole different bucket. And this is not what I'm not talking about reimbursement codes. I'm talking about the reality of how money flows through our medical system that ultimately pays you for your products. And so I spend a lot of time educating and training on that stuff, helping other organizations do that. And I think it's so important. And thinking about lean startup methodologies and go talk to your customers. I don't know how many companies I see, I say, how many customers have you talked to? And they go, none. Or, well, we have a guy, that type of thing. And it's like, yeah, we all have a guy. You need to talk to, lots of customers about what they will buy and why. And so I think, getting involved in understanding the whole lean startup approach and not raising money till you really need to, and really have clarity on what you're trying to do to the extent you possibly can get it is really important. But understanding the healthcare system and figuring out how to learn about it if you don't know is critical.
Yeah, so if I think about, where we collaborate and partner, right? It's across the whole ecosystem, and there's no rhyme or reason and no specific area that we target, that we focus on. It's all about making sure that we're bringing the value we bring and capitalizing on the value that our partner brings. And to me, that it's a very pharma perspective, because they've done this really well for a long period of time. But if you look at 10 years ago, structured deals weren't that common, right? There wasn't strategics making tranched investments with a call option on the back end. Now they're all over the place, right? And so it's trying to solve a problem with a solution that maybe can work for everybody to create a win-win-win situation. Would I love to always be buying things, early and, be able to take it exactly the way I would want it? Sure, yes, but that's not how life works, right? I think if everybody asked themselves, what is a typical standard, venture-backed funding model, there is not one. Every situation is different. Every market is different. Every competitor or strategic environment is all different. And it's adapting and being nimble, but also being open to that, right? I mean, to me, that's the feedback that I always give is like, don't go in with a bias. Let's talk through it and see if we can get to a solution that might work for you and might work for me. If it doesn't work for one of us, that's fine. We've at least talked through it and we've removed that off the table, and then we can go to different structures or opportunities to talk through. So
I want to go back to Lisa's comment. I think the most important thing is to understand the economics around your product. Where we've done that badly, it's been painful, and where we've thought it through, and where we had alignment, it becomes clear. It's the most important piece, and it's not always the answer you want. The best innovation, the most exciting innovation may have a very difficult path to either get paid or reimbursed, or actually to incentivize a physician to use it. So I think that's critically important. And I think building on the comments I made earlier, if you want to build a company to get bought, you need to understand what the buyer's looking for. And those conversations, I think going back to Nate's comments, I think you need to talk to the strategics of interest early, often, and remember you're in that meeting to learn as much as, and maybe even more importantly than you are to pitch. And make sure you come out of the meeting with more information than maybe you deposited, because that's the only way you're going to be able to align eventually to that acquisition or that structured deal. I think that point's really well made. The amount of structure we're seeing in MedTech and the amount we're going to need to see to make deals happen is just going to continue to proliferate.
Well, and every interaction that you have with a strategic, right, is, to your point, a deposit of investment, right? It's building the relationship with that strategic, with that hopefully champion within the strategic, so that they become your champion inside and can actually do the work for you, right? That's what you ultimately want. And so building that relationship, fostering that, and building it on trust is the most important piece of this whole equation.
So when you think about the collaborations that are happening right now, and you think about how things have evolved, what do you all think is working well? What's not working so well? And what can we be doing better as a collective group to accelerate innovation even further?
There's so little, to speak about, to be honest, but there's so much opportunity. So we're seeing examples, but the kind of collaborations we have in med tech are dwarfed by decades of. If you think about biopharma, there are partnerships on top of partnerships. They are so advanced in taking slices of revenue streams or potential revenue streams and turning that into a financial instrument. So I think there is huge opportunity. And we're seeing it not just at this level of developing new technology, but I think we're seeing collaborations happen with health systems and major device companies, with imaging companies, with device companies and health systems. So I think we're in a transformational moment, and it's going to continue to build, but it's still very early days, I would say.
I think the collaborations between the little companies and the big companies, not to rain on everybody's parade, they're really tough. They don't work so well a lot of the time. The big companies expect things to be done a certain way. The little companies can't afford to do them that way. And sometimes the better thing to do is to wait and to get a little further along. I've seen so many collaborations with health systems in particular where the pilot never lands. They fly off into nowhere. It's because they have other things to worry about. They're worried about whatever's going on at that health system or whatever's going on at that big MedTech company that quarter that needs to be attended to, while the little company is desperately trying to get its first real paying client. And so I think sometimes the best answer is to wait on the collaboration and to try to get smaller partners, customers, not go after the biggest, 800-pound gorillas on your day one, because you probably can't work with them very well yet. They don't know how to work with you culturally, and you don't know how to work with them culturally, and it could kill you in the process. So I don't know. I worry about that sometimes, how early some of these deals get struck.
So the other thing you're starting to see is the big industry societies like American Heart Association, like ACC, like Heart Rhythm Society, doing more. They're doing pitch competitions. HRS now has HRX, which is the Digital Health Summit, and they're getting better about pitches. But what I'm trying to get them to do now is to collaborate like AHA is doing with MedTech
A pitch
Innovator.
is nice, but not if there's nobody there to catch it.
Right. And so it's getting the right people at these events at HRS and AHA, and getting investors interested in a reason to go. So you're starting to see that evolve, but I'd love to hear from the group. What do you think is the best way to do that, and what kind of structure would you want to see at, say, an HRS or AHA pitch event that would make you want to go and actually spend time listening to the pitches?
To give credit, we had a panel in Israel. The meeting that I would point to that I think did the best job of this is ICI. And ICI was doing a Shark Tank type competition before CRF did Shark Tanks, and everyone's doing a Shark Tank. So years ago, they created a meeting where there's great clinical content, but it really also integrated that with early ideas and startups, and it's part of the Israeli culture, and it drew all of us from the US and all over the world to that meeting so that, one, we could spend time with each other, but also, be surrounded by innovation. I think that model has grown into all these other meetings, and the meetings become so much more interesting when it's not just about the new big trial data, but it's about the new ideas, and there's platforms for those ideas. And the discussion's not just about physicians' perspective, but big companies' perspectives, small companies' perspectives. So a lot of credit to the Israelis again on that front.
And if you recall, early on, right, there was a workshop the first day of ICI.
Yes.
I don't know if people remember that 12, 15 years ago. But basically, they would put a bunch of different medical device, tools and other catheters and other things on the table, and they would pair strategics with startup, with entrepreneurs, with government, and say, you guys have the day to come up with a new medical device just using the stuff on the table, right? And so they created that environment where there was collaboration. Then it went into the Shark Tank as the follow-on. And so they have innovated how they think about innovation. And I thought, at the panel earlier today, there was 7,200 startups in Israel, right? Nobody thinks about how many are actually there. Everybody thinks about, well, the U.S., Minnesota, Boston, the Bay Area here, right? But Israel is probably one of the largest in terms of that innovation and that collaboration across the various stakeholders.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Shark Tank idea. One of the things I heard that UT Southwestern is doing with, I think it's the Blackstone Launchpad, is they're calling it Dolphin Tank, because Shark Tank, they start to, are we running out of time? What is that? We're losing power. And it's a more friendly environment. So instead of attacking the founder, like, you should do this and you should do that, and that was a terrible pitch, it's a little bit friendlier. It's you can tell them positive and negative feedback. But we tried that at HRX this year, and we had a panel of a couple investors.
You were able to find nice VCs to do that?
The physicians were not nice, but the VCs were actually pretty nice. But I think we should do more of that, and I think having a group of people, like, after a pitch, we should have an assessment, real-time feedback, and maybe have somebody from the FDA, somebody from CMS, an investor or two, a strategic or two, to give them good feedback. Because a lot of times what you'll see is, they'll design a study protocol that might get them FDA clearance, but will never get them payer coverage. And they could have solved that problem and saved millions of dollars if they sat and got that feedback at a
Yeah,
panel like
the best
that.
event I was ever part of like this was one where the prize was you got time with payers and providers to ask them questions. And so we had signed up a bunch of provider organizations, the right people, the purchasing people. We had signed up a bunch of payer people, the right people who made decisions about what to cover. And instead of giving prize money or whatever, we gave time. And the commitment to counsel and mentor them for a period of time. And it was really effective in helping those companies. And I think that type of mentoring model is really good, more than just sort of a one-day competition, and everybody goes home with a trophy or whatever. But the longer-term mentoring matching, I think, is a highly effective approach that helps companies for real.
And I think if you get payers and you get CMS and you get FDA there, some of the best feedback we got from this last HRX was, I can't believe you had an FDA lounge. And then you talk to the people from the FDA, and they loved it. They're like, it's so cool to see all this emerging innovation. But before we did that, a lot of the startups were afraid to even talk to the FDA. There was a perception that if they talk to the FDA too early, it's going to delay their process, or they may say something wrong. Maybe that's true in some cases, but for the most part, the FDA is going to give you great advice, and it's free, and it's not going to cost you $1,000 an hour from a consultant, and it's the right advice in many cases. But I think we should do more of that. It'd be great to get the FDA and CMS here and have some sessions with them. But would love to hear any other ideas that you all think we should do at conferences like this, or
Well, I'll give you another example. Andrew Cleland at Fogarty Institute or Innovation brought, the deputy FDA director and had a 2-week session with them educating them on innovation. And so invited, VCs and strategics. And so I spent about 2.5, 3 hours explaining how we view innovation and the collaboration that is needed and required. So it's not only just to the startup community, right? It is to how the whole ecosystem works together and educating everybody along the whole chain.
And so some of the things you're starting to see come to fruition, the FDA now has this TAP program, the Total Product Lifecycle Advisory Program, which is in a way a concierge service. If you can get breakthrough status and then get into the program, it's an amazing program to get into. And just looking in the crowd, I know Philip just got in with Akurai, so congratulations on that. And then Happy Tech and some of the others, Akurai, I think they've or Accuracardia, they're trying to get breakthrough status to get into the program. Any of the startups in the room that have not heard about the program, I highly recommend that you look at it and try to get into that program. It's amazing, but we need more of that. And I think that will, if it works, and it seems to be working well, they'll expand it. But would love to hear maybe Nate's perspective on, as you see things evolving, are there certain things that Philips is wanting to get involved with, or how are you collaborating with the industry? I know you have Cardiation Capital, but are there other things that you're able to share that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do, and which is more of the clinical partnership. So I think, and a lot of medtech companies do this too, is reaching out with their customers and creating collaborations and clinical studies to expand and bring out more knowledge there. And then I think that's the opportunity to bring it back to startups. I think the most important thing is just to have healthy, candid conversations and understand where each side is coming from and what problems you're trying to solve. I often say, well, it's great to be creative. One person's creativity is another person's complexity. So trying to keep things simple, and I think one way to do that is to demystify where various stakeholders are coming from. And once you find sort of the common ground, whether it's working with the payers, working with regulatory, understanding where a strategic might be coming from, and also an investor, I think that's where you try to get the win-win. And I think having those candid conversations is very helpful.
Can I just add something?
Sure.
The other thing I think that's really helpful from either VCs or large strategic groups is, we often say to young companies, you should do this. You should have an FDA strategy or a reimbursement strategy like this, blah, 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 blah. And then they leave and they're like, shit, I don't know how to do that. So we should have, and as much as possible, a list of vendors that are, and I don't mean the ones that cost $1 million for a project, small people, great consultants who really know how to work with these companies and help them, and we should give them that list. We should say, you need a regulatory strategy that looks like this. Here's a person who can help you. And to keep a curated list that you can offer to people when you tell them your good advice that you can't personally help them with, because I think then it's practical.
So to your point, as a startup that went through MedTech Innovator, one of the biggest benefits I got from that was the network of consultants on the reimbursement side, and just in general, to ask those questions that we just didn't know what to do or how to do it. You had a network of people going through the program you could talk to. I know we've only got 2 minutes left. I'd love to hear any closing comments people had, and then maybe open it up for a question or two, which is probably breaking
Well,
some
just
sort
on
of
this
rule.
topic of where we need to sort of enable more efficiency and collaboration, clinical evidence generation, it's hard, it's expensive, and it's not getting easier. It's getting more expensive and getting more difficult. Hospitals are being forced to focus on efficiency, and running trials is a bottleneck issue. And so if you think about what we all want, we want products that are impactful. We want evidence that shows that impact, that drives the economics and drives the utilization, drives regulatory approvals, ultimately drives the business. And we should all be concerned about, how do we make that more efficient for all of us, whether it's trials that Medtronic's running or Philips running or a small company. So it's definitely something we haven't talked about, but I think it's definitely key to our business, and trying to be good at it and figure out how to work within a system that is constrained is something we should certainly put more energy into.
I think one area that we haven't talked about that I see going forward that's going to have a lot of kind of collaboration and partnership is data and AI, and imaging for that matter, right? All of the guided procedure technology, if you think about what the world looks like in 10, 15, 20 years from now from a medical device, it's going to be all connected. It's going to be all data generating. It's going to be, how do you use that data to get better outcomes longer term? And that's not what the historical medtech world has been, right? And so we have to partner and collaborate on that front, that people have been living this for 20, 30, 40 years and understand all the trials and tribulations of what needs to happen. And then how do you actually apply it to medical devices?
And I think right along with that, we've got another reason we need CMS in the room and commercial payers is they're not reimbursing it appropriately today. And you look at the RPM codes, or remote physiologic parameter codes, as an example. It should not be one reimbursement rate for everything. It should be different if you're managing heart failure versus sleep apnea versus other chronic conditions. And so I think you're right. We'll see a massive shift. You see all this data influx into the clinics, and I'm sure you have the same discussions I do. These clinics are overwhelmed. They can't handle more data. So us as a collective group, we've got to figure out a better way to get actionable data, and only actionable data, to the right physician on the patient's care team. You can't send all the data from a defibrillator to the EP because they don't want all this additional data. A perfect example of this is when they put a temperature sensor in the biomonitor at Medtronic. We thought in the middle of COVID it would be really useful, but nobody wanted the data. All the EP said, great data, send it to the primary care physician, but we didn't have a mechanism to do it. So you're right, we've got to solve the data problem. But there's got to be quick reimbursement around it, or people just won't spend time on
But
it.
nobody's going to reimburse it if it doesn't prove it does something material, and that's the real issue.
True.
And I think, the giant med tech companies have had pretty mixed success in the digital front, and it's really not a field that lends itself to traditional sales models, business models, or anything else. It's traditional about med tech. And so one of the things that we can do to help all the innovative companies working on this is make sure that the big med tech companies hire people that understand these things and really help them build those businesses differently, because it's not a traditional business model, and it can't be.
So it looks like we're out of time, but I'd love, maybe we do that panel next year or in Portugal. We'll tackle the AI data issue, what we could be doing. But appreciate it. This was awesome. Thanks for doing
Thanks,
this.
Ken. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.